Pentagon now confirms the existence of a secretive UFO program tasked with investigating reports of unidentified flying objects.
The U.S. government may have physical evidence of, and we're quoting, off-world vehicles not made on this Earth.
They are all fighting each other in the 17 intel agencies over who tells that we're not alone in this universe. We have never been alone in this universe.
The man who spent 10 years working on the government's secret study of UFOs.
I was initially brought in to set up a counterintelligence and security mechanism. It was there that I learned that the true focus of ATIP was study unidentified aerial phenomena.
I believe strongly that Area 51 is a training place for developing different aerial or space-age weapons.
It's technology way beyond what we know in our culture today.
The government is very aware something is happening. It's not in their control. So yes, it does. It keeps me up at night.
You've got all of these people who've had experiences with these craft and with the beings.
My next memory is of being in like a hospital room or somewhere on a table, and they're doing things to me, and it hurts, and I'm mad.
There's every indication that this is some kind of an approach to mankind and this planet from some other intelligent entity that is not human.
With the amount of media publicity to UFOs and UAPs and the stories that have come out, there truly has been the birth of this disclosure movement, this push to get the United States government to tell the truth finally.
We need to be ready. Something big is coming.
Start that again. Welcome back to the Special Access Podcast, and thank you for joining us once again. Welcome to our new followers and listeners. You're very welcome on board, and we're happy to have you along for the ride. So welcome to all our guests and listeners around the world. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Tonight's guest is Debra Jordan-Kauble, and after reporting a terrifying anomalous experience to Bud Hopkins, pioneer and researcher of the alien abduction phenomena, Debra's life took a dramatic turn as she became the central figure in Hopkins' best-selling book Intruders and in its popular TV adaptation. But while the TV series ended with a clear resolution, Debra's astonishing story continues in real life. Deborah has since made many public appearances and featured on numerous radio and television shows, and for 4 years, Deborah co-hosted her own internet radio show, Midwest Paratalk Radio, with Greg Cable. She's been an investigator for MUFON and founded her own paranormal research group, the Paranormal Underground. For the last 15 years, Deborah has been employed in the automotive manufacturing industry. She has been an active member of the UAW and the Red Cross. She's a member of Mensa, a licensed cosmetologist, a wife, a mother, a grandmother, and she lives in central Indiana with her husband, 2 dogs, and a cat. So welcome, Deborah. Thank you for joining us once again.
Thank you.
Welcome, Deborah.
Thank you.
So I'll hand it over to you, John, if you want to kick things off.
Okay, no worries. Hi, Deborah. Congratulations on your role in the new Observers movie. The producers really took that everyone to the edge in that film, I thought. I mean, that wasn't actually my comment. That was a comment by somebody who's quite famous in this topic. Unfortunately, I can't actually say who it was, but it was they took them to the edge, is what I was told. So you were selected above many other experiences. So let's find out why. When did all this start for you, Deborah? I mean, we know you're an experiencer, but when did all this begin for you?
The Observers, not
so much the observer side. Basically, right from the beginning. I mean, when you were a child.
Yes,
let's run through this as your life as an experiencer.
Okay. Well, yeah, it all started for me, I think, when I was very young. My earliest memory is around 6 years old when I was taken on a weekend trip with my older sister. She's like almost 12. She's 11 years older than me. And so when she could drive, she took me to Detroit, Michigan, which is up north from where we were in Indiana, for a weekend visit with friends. And I ended up disappeared one afternoon, and the entire neighborhood and all the people that we were visiting were out looking for me. And I always just remember that my sister found me. I remember coming out of this strange house after this incident that I'll tell you about in a second. And my sister was standing at the sidewalk, and I'm like, I remember thinking, oh, I was relieved because there was my sissy. And I ran to her and took her hand. She never spoke to me. We just walked back to the house. And then my next memories is, just we're home. Nothing extraordinary after that. But prior to that, I had been playing in the backyard with my little friend that I was visiting. And I kicked a ball over a fence, and I hopped over the fence to get the ball. And when I went to go back over the fence to get back in the yard, I suddenly didn't realize where I was. I didn't recognize anything, and I didn't know where I was. And I thought, oh my goodness, I remember thinking I'm lost. I didn't understand what was going on. And I walked around to the front of the house, and I saw a house that I thought looked like the house I should be in. I'd only been there one time, and I was a little kid, but the door was open. So I walked in the door, and I thought I recognized some furnishings and stuff, although it seemed like it was not all in the right places. Like, instead of there being a lamp on a table, there was a chair on a table. Things were just jumbled. Wow. And as I started to panic and run back out the door, I was met with a little boy who's I thought he was like my age, same height and all. I just remember he had big brown eyes and blonde hair, and he asked me to please stay and play with him. He had lots of toys that he wanted to show me. And, I heard toys, and I'm like, okay. So the next thing I remember, we're in this room that, as an adult now and remembering, this room didn't have anything to do with that house that I thought I was in, for sure, because it was huge and all illuminated. There weren't lamps or lights in there, but it was just white. There were some things on the floor, and the floor had like a sunken living room kind of part to it in the middle where it was sunk down a little bit. And I remember sitting on the edge of that step down, and I saw a red flashing light on the wall. I saw what looked like a table size thing start to slide out of the wall. The boy gave me a toy at one point that was like about the size of a shoebox with a hole in it and like little strings across the front. And I thought, I was supposed to pluck those strings like it was some kind of a toy guitar or toy musical instrument, And then as I'm plucking these strings, I feel pain in my leg, which startles me away from my distraction with this toy thing. And I get afraid, and I'm ready to leave. And then I remember the next memory is of in being back in the house, in the front door, the door's open. The little boy's asking me to stay. And I'm like, nope. And then his mother, or I thought it was his mother, an adult woman, comes out of some other room, and she is really mad that I am here. And I remember her saying something to the effect of, what is she doing here? She doesn't belong here. She needs to leave now. And bam, as quickly as she said that, it was like someone shoved me out the door. But I don't remember seeing anyone touch me or push me, but I just kind of shot out the door of this house. And that's when I looked up and saw my sister standing at the end of the walkway. And I felt relief instantly when I saw her. I'm like, oh, thank God it's my sister. The weird thing was, I don't remember her ever speaking to me or really even looking at me. She just took my hand and walked me back to where I was supposed to be. And then, years later, Bud came.
Can I just stop you there?
Yeah, sure.
You think this was actually a house, and do you think these were really people?
Now, I don't know. But I don't think so.
Do you think your perception had been altered? Is that the impression you get now? Do you think, you've looking back, you would
yes.
say your perception was altered, and maybe that young boy was not really a young boy? Maybe it was maybe it was a small grey, and maybe the adult was a large grey, and maybe the room you were in was a craft. Is that sort of the impression you get now?
That's the impression that I do get now. Yes, and especially when like my mom, like this was something that happened like when I was 6, and I'm 60. Almost 63 now, I'm 62. And so when Bud first came to the house after I had contacted him after the June 30, 83 incident that started all of it, we were all sitting around the kitchen table talking. Bud had a way of asking just the right questions, and it would make you trigger memories that you hadn't had. We hadn't talked about that whole incident of that trip to Detroit and years and years and years. And when he asked my mom and sister, was there anything other strange things that happened when she was little? And they both remembered that I had been in Detroit with Kathy and then I'd been missing all day. And they confirmed that, my memory was of, and I thought, I can't believe I forgot that, and then I started remembering it, spontaneously, and we're all talking about it. And Kathy, I said, you found me. And Mom goes, that's right. The woman that called me said that everybody was out looking for you, and Kathy actually is the one who brought you back. So that was some confirmation.
How did she describe when she found you? How did you said she was at the end of the boardwalk?
Mm-hmm.
Is it?
She never.
Sorry, I'm being British. I do apologize. What is the boardwalk?
Oh, that's okay. A sidewalk. It's like the pathway that goes from the front door down to the sidewalk, and the sidewalk runs along the edge of the street. Okay. So she was at the.
So we call it a pathway. We call it a pathway in the UK.
Okay.
So does she recall being on that part on the sidewalk then, watching you come down a path from a house? Does she remember that? Has she recalled that for you?
She does not. She, at the time, she didn't remember anything until she didn't remember where she found me or anything. She just knew when she got back to their house, I had a hold of her hand, She didn't tell Bud that she remembered anything else after that, as far as I know.
Deborah, can I just ask again? Is Kathy also an experiencer?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Okay. She actually, when I first reached out to Bud, I wrote a letter, about what happened in 83 that left that mark in the yard. But I started the letter with my sister's experience from 1965. So I kind of threw her under the bus because I did not ask her permission. She wasn't happy about it, but she got over it. But yeah, she'd had this weird experience in 65, taking my mother to a bingo game at the local church. She had dropped my mom off at the bingo game at one church and was driving down the street going home, and suddenly felt compelled to pull into the parking lot of another church that was on the way home. So she pulled in the parking lot and she went around to the back of the parking lot, to the back lot, and parked. And she said, as soon as she looked up, there was a UFO above her car. And it was like multicolored lights. It was really low. And then she said it picked her whole car up with her in it. It picked her up. And then the next thing she remembered is waking up in her car in the parking lot of the church. It's dark out now. And not only is it dark out, multiple hours have passed, and it's now nearly time to pick my mom up from the bingo game. So she goes and picks my mom up from the bingo game, and she remembered.
So how long would your mom would it be in that bingo game? So how much missing time are we talking about here that she can't?
We're talking probably about at least 4 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, they were serious bingo players back then. Still are. But so yeah, it was several hours, and I don't recall right now. I don't remember if she had any memory in between time, because all I knew for years is that the next memory she had after she saw it in the parking lot was the next thing was waking up in the car and time had passed. So But she talked about it. She was frantic about it. She told mom about it when she picked her up. She came home and talked about it. And I mean, as I've said before, my family has always been open-minded, and we've always had strange things happen around us, even when I was really little. So I assumed that everybody had these strange things happen. I just thought that was normal life. It wasn't until I got to school and started telling other kids that I realized this ain't normal. So I might not want to talk a lot about it, you know.
Who does this sound like, Dave?
Yeah.
Does this sound like? This is the conversation we had about me on the last.
Oh yeah.
Our last conversation we had together, basically the same thing. I mean, it was normal. It was always normal. It was abnormal until I got to school and realized the other kids couldn't see things. You know?
And I didn't really think much about, you know, her experience other than that was cool, you know, that she had it. I have a younger brother and a younger sister. We're all close together in age, about 14 months apart each. Kathy was like the first one, and then it was like a whole generation later we came along. But I always looked up to her. I always wanted to be her. I never, you know, none of us ever had a reason to doubt her. Neither did my parents. She wasn't the type of person that would make stuff up like that. And every now, us younger kids realized that if we did pick on her a little bit, we could get a rise out of her and get her mad. So we would kind of laugh at her or something, and she'd get mad and clam up, you know, or swat at us with a hairbrush or something. But, you know, but I never felt like it was, I didn't take it on as my own experience. I mean, it was a separate memory. It was hers. And, you know, I just knew that I had seen weird things. My little sister used to talk about seeing colors around people. She used to see colors and sparkles and auras around people from the time that she could first talk. She started talking about that and seeing people that aren't there and all this stuff. And one time she told mom that she said, Debbie is a sparkler. And she said, some people when people touch things, it leaves a little bit of their color on whatever they touched, and then it fades away. And she said, but when I touch something, it looks like sparklers and it stays for a long time. I said, okay. So yeah, my whole family is a little strange, I guess.
Did you used to see, I mean, this is not one of my questions that I put down, but I just want to ask this question while I got the opportunity here, Deborah. Did you used to see orbs at all when you were young? Did you see floating orbs, small ones at all?
Yep. Yeah. I remember a time that my mom was taking me somewhere, and this was an actual orb. I know what you're talking about, light orbs. We have blue orbs and green orbs and white orbs that whiz by our heads and through our house. That's happened my entire life. And everywhere I live, not in just that house that happened in '83, but everywhere I've moved to. Even my stepdaughter, who is a complete non-believer in all of this, she was just making a comment about how goofy she thought it was, and, you know, but she loved me, and it's okay. And then this blue ball of light shoots through the living room window. She whizzes right past our head, goes into the dining room, flips around, comes right back between her and I. And she's like, okay, then I'm good now. So it's like somebody said, okay, we'll show her. So,
deny this.
Yeah.
I'd kill for that. I'd kill for that to happen to my family. So I could. Oh,
took me off guard too. I'm like, what the hell? And when they fly by you, you know what it feels like? You know what static electricity feels like on you when you're kind of charged up, your hair kind of stands up. Well, I kind of get that little staticky feeling right before it happens. And then as it's whizzing by, it just feels like a little staticky, you know? So I could definitely sense something was coming. But when my mom and when I was really little and I was being taken somewhere with my mom, and there were a bunch of other people with us, we were outside in a parking lot. And I remember looking up because everybody was looking up around us. And there was this silver ball just hanging in the sky right above us. And everybody was like, oh, and freaking out and everything. And my mother, who had a hold of my hand, she's like, oh, okay. And she says, come on. And we just walked on in. Everybody else is standing there. And I'm like, okay. So, you know, I was raised to believe that stuff is normal. So
yeah. And we've done 18 minutes so far, Deborah. But I've done one question, so we'll get on to the next one.
I'm sorry.
Talk about missing time. My God,
this is great. I'm enjoying this. Okay, so I mean, do you perceive this as? I mean, do you see this as a negative thing that's been happening to you, or is it a perception of it being negative because they don't ask you permission?
You know, when I was younger and it first started, when I first became aware of it and conscious of it, like back in 78, you know, and then again in 83, those contacts, those incidents were frightening to me, you know, and after 83, I thought I was having a nervous breakdown and it scared the crap out of me. But I don't feel that it's negative at this point in my life. I feel like any injury that I may have incurred, like with my eyes or whatever, and the fear and terror that I felt was not intentional. I don't feel it was intentional. I feel it was a side effect of, you know, what was going on. And I don't think it was meant to harm me. And honestly, I feel even now, you know, there's a whole lot of focus now going on about, oh, you know, they're a threat to us in the UAPs, you know, or in our skies, unwanted and all that stuff. And they could cause accidents. And I think in my mind, our own planes run into each other all the time. I mean, well, not all the time, but it happens. Our own planes have accidents with each other, and an accident could happen. But honestly, I feel that whoever they are, if they really intended to mean us harm, that would have happened a long time ago, because clearly they can do stuff a whole lot better than we can. And so like, I don't feel afraid of knowing that they're out there, because I feel like they're fully capable of wiping us all out in the blink of an eye right now, and could have a long time ago. And frankly, sometimes I get so annoyed with people. I think, you know, go ahead. And but I mean, they wonder. People wonder why don't they come and talk to us? I said, well, have you seen how we talk to each other? Why would they're obviously smart, but
yeah.
So I don't think of it as a negative thing. Because to me, it's exciting to know that there's something else out there besides us. There's more to life. In my view, we see this world that we're in with our eyes and our ears. We see a tiny sliver of what is actually all around us. We can only perceive this tiny sliver. I want to know what the rest of that stuff is. That's what I get excited about. And I know they're in there somewhere.
Yeah. You mentioned your eyes then. Did they do something to your eyes, or was it one eye, out of interest?
No. On June 30, 1983 incident in Mom's backyard that marked the yard and everything, I got hit in the chest by this ball of light that spread through me. And it was so intense and bright that even though my eyes were closed, I could still see it. And then when it stopped, my vision was blotched, like you've gotten your picture taken with flash bulbs and you didn't blink, and you know how that makes that mark in your eyes. Well, my eyes were blurred like that for a long time afterwards, as things were happening out in front of the yard with me. And then my eyes were never right after that. My vision was never right. And then in my 30s, I was diagnosed with macular degeneration and cataracts. And by the time I hit 50, I had lost both my corneas. Now I have acrylic corneas, and my macular degeneration is stable. You know, I take the lutein and all kinds of stuff for it, but I'm checked every 6 months. I have no proof. I cannot prove it, but I believe in my heart. I feel that night damaged my eyes and caused all that to go on. So I'm the only one in my family that's ever had those issues, except my older sister, who has wet macular degeneration. Mine is dry. So
that ball of light, did that come down from a craft, or did that just come as like an orb into you?
I don't know where it came from. As I turned, when I was in the garage trying to look for an intruder, you know, I thought a burglar was in my mom's garage. And when I was in there looking around for this burglar, I suddenly felt real hot and weird. And I felt like I had to get out of the garage right away. And as I stepped through the pedestrian door of the garage, that's where this thing came out of nowhere. I don't know where it came from and hit me. You know, it felt like it hit me in the solar plexus area, and this intense light just washed over me and just spread all over. And I felt it, to me, it seemed like time stopped, because it seemed like this continued forever and ever, but I know it didn't. And I felt like every single molecule of my body individually, I could feel vibrate, but I couldn't move. And it was, and all the memory I remember is thinking, oh my God, this is what it feels like to die. You know, because I thought I was dead. And I don't know how long that whole thing lasted. And I don't know what happened in between the time that it hit me and the time that it stopped. And I finally started to be able to see again in front of me. And that's when I saw this egg-shaped craft out in my mom's yard, and these 6 small people that I thought were kids out in my mom's backyard moving around. And I remember thinking, why are these kids in mom's backyard? You know, and I could see them move around. I couldn't see a lot of detail.
Let's go straight to that story. Let's go straight to that story then, Deborah. Let's talk right from the beginning there. What happened there that you, before you first saw that, and then talk us into it.
Well, I was living with my parents at the time. I was a single mom with 2 little kids, and I was about to go sew and cut out some patterns with a friend who lived behind us. And I was looking out the window, and I had noted an unusual light in the pump house of the swimming pool that was in the backyard. And I mentioned it to Mom, and she said, well, your dad probably left it on. Don't worry about it. And so I went ahead and left to go. But before I left, I thought, I'm going to drive around the turnaround. I had an uneasy feeling, not thinking about aliens or UFOs, thinking about prowlers, burglars. So I went to the turnaround to check before I left to make sure I didn't see anybody back there. And I noted at that point the pedestrian door to the garage was now open also. But instead of stopping, I just went on to Deanna's house, because it was like 1 minute away, and called her. And I told her, and she said, don't worry about it. She goes, your dad will get it when he gets home. I'll just lock the door. We'll be fine. I'm like, okay. She called right back immediately and said, I need you to come home right now. And she sounded weird, and scared, which my mom never got scared of anything. So it kind of freaked me out. I hurried back home. I went into the house and I got my dad's shotgun, which was not loaded. And Mom's like, you know, that's not loaded, right? And I said, yeah, I know, but whoever I encounter isn't going to know it. I can get close enough to them to hit them with it before they know. So, and I'm not I am brave now, but I was not a brave person then. So the fact that I did that at all is a little out of character for me, but I did it. So I'm wandering all over the place, looking in the yard, not seeing anything, looking around the swimming pool. Then I find myself in the garage looking, don't see anybody in there. And that's when I get that feeling, oh my God, I got to get out here. Something is wrong. And I head to the door, and bam, that light hits me out of nowhere. I don't know where it came from. I thought I was dying. I don't know how long it lasted, but at some point it started to stop. The shaking stopped, and the light faded, and the light dimmed in my eyes. And I felt someone pull down on my shoulder from behind. And I thought I could hear a person say, it was unfortunate that I had felt that pain. And then I looked out in front of me, and I saw the kids. I saw 6, what I thought were children, moving around in the yard. And they all kind of came from different areas of the yard, lined up in a line out in front of me, and then kind of slid or glided down towards me, but not at me, you know, across the yard. And that is when I saw the egg-shaped craft thing. Now, in retrospect, I cannot imagine that is any kind of a flying craft that could fly anywhere. Even with 6 children in it, they'd all be crammed together. It wasn't that big. It wasn't much bigger than the pump house, maybe 10 feet tall. And then, you know, maybe 8 or 10 feet around its circumference, and then got smaller. But I saw it, and I didn't want to look at it, but I did not want to look at it because I was terrified that it was going to come closer to me. And as these children moved towards it, I noted a ball of light about the size of a basketball, about 20 or 25 feet in front of me. And I felt it was looking at me. I don't know why. And it went down really slow to the ground and then came right back up in front of me. And at that point, I thought, oh my God, my kids. And I again heard this disembodied voice say, your children are fine. And I could, at this point, I could move, and I heard my name, which I later discovered that it was my mom, who had stuck her head out the kitchen door up the top level of this tri-level and called my name. And when I heard her call my name, it was like someone snapped their fingers, and everything I just described to you with the light and everything was gone out of my head. Everything in front of me was gone. The crafty thing was gone. The little kids were gone. Everything was gone. And I remember turning around and walking up the bottom steps. Mom says, is everything all right? And I said, yeah, everything's cool. We decided, my friend and I decided not to sew, but they came back and we tried to swim at the pool. And we all got sick. And I started noticing a halo around all the lights in my vision. And all three of us got really nauseated. So they went home and I came in and went to bed. And the next morning when I woke up, my eyes were swollen shut and so incredibly painful that my mom took me to the emergency room. And I was taken from there to an ophthalmologist's office across the street. And the first question he asked me was, have you looked into the arc of a welder's torch? And I said, no. I'm thinking to myself, why in the hell would you ask me something like that? Not remembering, I didn't say anything about the night before in the light because at that point, I still did not remember it. It was a few days later on the 4th of July. Everyone went out to the backyard to celebrate the 4th of July and swim and everything. And that was when the family noticed this mark that was in the yard. And there was right where that thing was. It was about an 8-foot diameter circle. It had a 49-foot swath that came off it across the backyard up to the driveway and ended in a perfect arc. And the swath was about 2 feet wide. And everybody's like, oh my God, what happened to your yard, Grandma? And my mom, out of nowhere, she says, oh, that's where the UFO landed the other night. And I looked at her and I remember thinking, what in the hell did you say that for? And then I looked back at the mark in the yard and bam, everything started coming back. I mean,
Can I just stop you there a second, Deborah?
Mm-hmm.
Your mom, sorry. She sounds like she's also been an experiencer all her life. That's the way it comes across. That she seemed blasé when the first time you ever said something. You saw the silver ball in the sky and you all saw the silver ball and she was blasé about it. Now she points outside to you, are you okay out there? And there's a UFO in the yard and she's blasé about it again and the thing vanishes. It's a bit strange, isn't it?
It is. I'm telling you, my mom was adopted from an orphanage in Louisville, Kentucky by a master sergeant in the United States Army who took her to China, and she lived there for 2 years and then came back here and lived in Rhode Island on a base and then was back in Kentucky. And that's where she eventually met my dad when she was 16. She, as she told Bud asked her, you know, have you had experiences? You know, he asked everybody. And my mom told him, you know, her and I have the same scar on our leg. I thought my scar was inherited from her, but
is it a certain shape, Deborah? Is that scar a certain shape?
It's an oval scoop. It's a scoop of meat right out of my shin, like a little scoop mark.
Deborah,
I had it.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Does it look like a BB has been removed from your leg?
Yeah. The doctor said, the doctor made a comment one time. It almost looked like I'd had a bone marrow, like a biopsy. Yeah. Like a punch biopsy. That's what they called it. The edges of it were sharp and clear.
Yeah. I've got a scoop mark on the side of my leg. I'm not an experiencer, and I don't have many sightings. Many to report. Yeah. But it looks like a BB has been removed from my leg, and the wound is never closed. It is raised around the edge. It literally looks like a tiny little
like
ice
a crater.
Cream scoop.
It looks like a crater on the moon.
Bloody crater. Yes.
Exactly. That's what mine looks like. And mom's is exactly like mine in exactly the same place. And I thought I inherited it from her. Well, then she tells Bud she has a vague memory. You know, a lot of her memory is fuzzy. And I think it's because of being adopted and living in an orphanage and all. But she did have a memory of being chased through the woods by a little boy. And he was scaring her, and she fell, and something poked her in the leg. And I thought, okay, that's weird, because I was with the little boy when something poked me in the leg. But
it's interesting. So you both described them as little boys, or even when you saw the craft that was in your yard, you said how close were they to you? These little children.
I'm not really good with distances, but I'm going to say maybe 50 feet or more out there. And my vision was kind of janky. So I had splotchies, you know, I couldn't see some detail. I knew they all seemed to be dressed alike, but they moved weird. They kind of glided, but yeah. So anyway, when I woke up the next day, eyes jacked up, and we then saw the mark in the yard and started remembering that being hit by the light. And I think at that point I had like a nervous breakdown because I couldn't sleep. I felt paranoid, scared that something was coming back to get me. As the bathroom on the upstairs floor that overlooks where the mark in the yard was, I could not go in there at night and use the bathroom because I kept feeling like something was going to pull me through the window. That's how intense it was. And my kids were little, and I was so scared that something was going to come get them that I slept on the floor between their twin beds for days and days. And I didn't really even sleep. I just kind of sat there like I was waiting for something, you know. It's like I had my Roy moment from Close Encounters, you know, when he was waiting for something. And I couldn't sleep at night. As soon as the sun came up and other people came around and I felt safe, I would just collapse with exhaustion. I'm so grateful to my parents at this point in my life because they were understanding and helped me with my kids, because I would have been completely screwed, you know, had my parents not been there to help me get through this. Now, I had read Bud's book, Missing Time, several months before this incident in June 30th of 1983. When I first picked the book up, I wasn't quite sure exactly what it was about. I mean, I'd heard of Barney and Betty Hill, and I'd barely heard about the Pascagoula guys, you know, but didn't really think much of it. And but when I started reading Bud's book, Missing Time, I couldn't read more than a paragraph or a couple chapters at a time. When I started getting into the meat of the other people's experiences, I'd have panic attacks that were so bad I'd end up going to the emergency room thinking I was having a heart attack. And my mom finally, after a week, she's like, you got to take that book back to the library because we can't afford you to keep going to the hospital all the time. We don't have health care here. It costs every time you walk through the door. Band-Aids are like $300. So, but I remembered that book. One of the things that happened when I saw the mark in the yard was my mind went straight to the Missing Time book. And because I knew that there was a place in the back, there was an address where you could write to the guy who wrote this book. So I went back to the library, got the book, got the address, and I proceeded to write this 14-page novel and took a ton of Polaroid pictures of the backyard, because that mark in the backyard, by the way, it stayed there for almost 2 years. And the first year that snow came, snow melted off of it. Wow. The first year.
Hang on. Yeah. Did you ever try taking some of the soil and pouring water on top of it? Did it bead away? Would it bead away from the soil?
Yeah. Not only that, I took chunks of it, which I had to like chisel out of the ground. And I put them in a cup of water and left it sit in the cup of water all night. And when I came back the next day, it was still a chunk of rock in the cup of water. It didn't take any moisture at all. I still have a bunch of sample pieces that actually even survived the tornado in my cedar chest. So I still have them. But yeah, moisture rolled off this. Later, Bud had its sample tested. There was no microbiological life in it at all. It was completely repelled all moisture, and they had to bake it in the oven. And I get this twisted all the time. I don't know if it's 1200 degrees for 8 hours or 800 degrees for 12 hours to even remotely dry it up to get it that way. And it still didn't act quite the same. It had a weirdish kind of smell to it. Also, it kind of smelled skunky, or sulfury, skunky, kind of funky smell.
And so have any scientists, apart from Bud, you said had this tested? Have you actually had this tested yourself, or has any scientists got in touch with you and asked you, can they test it? I know quite a few scientists. That's why I'm asking you, Deborah. I'm sure they would bite your hand off.
I got a whole bunch. I've got several samples of it still that I've kept over these years that, and like I said, fortunately survived the tornado. But just the testing that's been done on it is whatever scientist Bud took it to, as far as I know. But it's the plant life on it, the grass, it all looked as if it just laid down. It wasn't like crunched, smashed down. It just kind of laid down and turned grayish brown. And the
circle.
It was weird, like laid down. And as it began to heal, I say heal like a wound. The grass grew in from the outer edges back in like a wound. That grass that came in was thicker and darker green, almost had a purplish green hue to it. It was much hardier. It seemed like completely different grass than what had been there as it grew back in. And even after plant life, after several years, and the grass finally grew back in, it was still, you could still see the difference and where the mark was for many years. And there was a row of trees along the side where that thing was, and about a 5 or 6 foot swath, or maybe a little bigger. Like I said, my eyeball measuring is dyslexic. From the sky down, all those trees from probably the middle of July forward began to wither and fall off sooner than the other trees in the rest of the woods would normally do in the fall. And we had tomato plants on the other side planted where the driveway was, where the end of that swath ended. And those tomato plants had vines on them that were as big around as my wrists. And the tomatoes that grew were like grapefruits, but they were extremely bitter and acidic. You'd almost feel like they were going to burn the skin on your lips when you try to eat them. And the dandelions that grew along in the lawn between the mark and the swimming pool fence were 2 or 3 times the size of the other dandelions that were there. Now, my dad and my Uncle Jim, they're kind of like pickers, or collectors, and they had a old Geiger counter, probably from World War II, that was in my dad's workshop out back, and they were back there tinkering with it, and they managed to get it to 0, and they thought they were going to go up here and mess with it on this mark in the yard, which that was even before, I think that was before Bud came out the first time. But they said they could get it to 0 in the workshop, but when they got to the second chain link fence by the swimming pool, which was, there was a swimming pool, then there was the mark in the yard, then there was a house. When they got to that second chain link fence, they could no longer get it to 0, which that is an anecdotal thing, but it's just an interesting thing to note. I spent weeks calling I called the agricultural agent for the state of Indiana. I called the electric company. I called the gas company, trying to figure out a reasonable explanation as to what would cause this mark in the yard, because the last thing that I wanted it to be was anything that I was remembering and having nightmares about. And Everyone could tell me what it wasn't, but nobody could tell me what it was.
Did you live in an area with a densely populated area, or were you in a secluded area with not so many people where you were living at that time? Were there any neighbors that actually saw anything as well?
Yes, there were actually 2 neighbors that saw things that night, which we didn't even know about till Bud came and started knocking on doors. And we lived in Indianapolis, which is like the 11th largest city in the country. There are millions and millions of people. And where this happened is about 20 minutes from downtown Indianapolis in the suburbs. But the houses are farther apart. The plots of land are bigger. It's a little bit farther out of the suburb area, but still considered within Indianapolis. And when Bud came out, after he received my letter and answered it and the investigation began, and he made his first trip out to Indiana, first thing he did was go knocking on doors. And the neighbor directly to the north of us, that was in between that patch of woods, her house sits in the woods, and ours was outside the woods. And then the neighbor directly to the west of us across the street. Now, the lady next to us, she reported to Bud that night, she had seen a bright flash come from the backyard area, and that her TV had turned red. And I think she said her whole house filled with the red flash. And she was panic stricken. And I remember her husband telling Bud that when he came home from work, he found her cowering and terrified that somebody was going to come and get her out of their house. Yeah. And then the lady across the street was a shift nurse. She was an RN who worked at the local hospital, and she worked the late shift. So she had been in bed and was just about due to get up, to start getting ready for work. And she was awakened by the sound, and she told Bud it sounded like there was a jet plane about to crash into my house, and my whole house shook. And she saw a flash of light coming from the direction of our house. And it scared her. And the weirdest part of all was all of the digital clocks in the front part of her house stopped. And the power in the front part of her house stopped. But the power in the back part of her house, the clocks even, were fine and continued to run. And she never told anybody because, so
we had a UFO incident in 1983 in Swansea, we're in South Wales in the UK. Okay, there was a major incident in 1983 called the Night of the Triangles. One of the factories that was overflown by one of the triangles, they reported that the electricity, as it went over, was going off as it went past the building. At different points in the building, the electricity was going off. Mm-hmm. So that's really interesting. The same sort of thing was happening then. Yeah.
And then 20 years after Intruders was published, Bud got a letter from a woman who, as it turned out, lived in the street right behind, and she lived in the house at the street right behind Mom and Dad's house. And there's a little bit of a patch of woods and more property that separated the two. We couldn't see her house from our house unless all the leaves were off the trees, but she had written a letter to Bud and said, now she said she couldn't definitely pinpoint the exact date, but she knew it was around that time and that year. And she said her boys like to sleep in the garage with their friends. They'd have, sleep outs with their buddies. And the garage faced the woods, which also faced the back of my mom and dad's house. And she remembered one night the boys came in screaming bloody murder, that they saw hundreds of basketball-sized balls of light floating through the woods between her house and our house. And it scared them. The boys were terrified that these balls of light were going to come and get them. And they came running in the house screaming. And she said she went out and looked. I believe she didn't see anything, but the boys were so adamant that they would never go back out there again. And she said they never slept in the garage again. And it was something they liked to do like practically every weekend. And she thought it was very odd. And when she actually read Intruders, and she read the part about Mom seeing the basketball-sized ball of light around the bird feeder that night, which she says is the reason she called me to come home when she doesn't know why. And me seeing that basketball-sized ball of light kind of looking at me, that I felt was looking at me, she made the connection and thought maybe it's related. And so she took the time to write him a letter, and that was like 20 years later, which I found fascinating.
Yeah. How often has this been happening to you? You've had abductions, it sounds like. So, but how often has this been going on? As in, how regular has it been for you? Are you even aware of how regular, or are you just perceiving something might have happened because it feels I've got something, I've got some missing time here. What's gone on? Are you getting a complete memory blank on some of these occasions, or
well,
do you have recollections?
It seems like as I've gotten older, it's slowed down considerably, particularly after 1992 or so, and also I feel like, I've had a few odd things happen. I've had a little bit of missing time, but it doesn't, I'm not fearful. It doesn't leave me with fear or panic. I don't know. In my mind, I feel like, well, if I need to remember it, I will. If I don't, then I don't need to remember it. So I'm okay with that, But like I said, my experiences also seemed, they were much more physical, than they kind of transformed into more metaphysical or intellectual or psychic or spiritual, like out of body experiences and vivid lucid dreaming and things like that. So there's been a bit of a shift for me. I wrote a book about it recently called Extraordinary Contact: Life Beyond Intruders, that kind of, I hope, shows the progression from physical contact and initial fear till I'm to the point where I'm at now, and I did that mostly for people that, that's it. For people like me, so that they can see that, you get through this. Not only can you get through it, you can take from it and be a better person, stronger. You can get through things that you wouldn't believe you can get through. Honest to God, I watched my late husband kill himself. I watched him shoot himself with a 12 gauge in our backyard. I had a tornado. You know what? I had a tornado drop a house on me, and I lost everything I owned. And I was in the closet when it hit, and there was nothing left but the closet. And I had to be dug out of the debris, but I was unhurt. And those are life experiences that I know other people who could go through something like that, and they may not come through that. Or they may come through that so profoundly changed that they can't function, the way they need to anymore. I believe that the experiences I had in the past with this crazy stuff kind of trained me how to cope with the tragic and the outrageous. And I've gotten through it so well. I mean, I got a hell of a good therapist, and I do EMDR therapy for PTSD, which is fabulous. And my therapist knows about the weird stuff and the weird part of my life and the experiences I've had. She even read my book. And we even did EMDR therapy for that June 30th, 1983 incident, and a couple of other ones that I felt very anxious about, and it helped. So I want people to know that there's help out there, and you can have a good life, and you can, use this to be stronger.
Deborah, you said after so long of this happening, after so many experiences, do you have even a best guess or a slight inclination as to the reason you may have been taken or gone through some of these experiences?
I don't, that's a question I've asked myself my entire life. Why me? And why not my brother or my other little sister? They don't have these experiences, but seems like me and my older sister did, and mom, and I don't know about the rest of her family because we don't really know them. But I don't know if it's a genetic thing that's like they followed us for generations upon generations. I don't know if I am the product of some kind of manipulation in the past. You know, sometimes I feel like I was born to be who I am and do what I'm doing now, because I feel like I have some kind of destiny, like to open people's eyes and mind to the extraordinary, the unthinkable, you know. And I have my own theories, but I think there are a lot of different agendas, and there are a lot of different kind of life forces out there. And I think some of it may be dimensional. Some of it may be, extra dimensional. Some of it may be time travel. I even got the impression one time that I was meeting somebody that I was actually related to, that somehow they had come from somewhere far, far in the future back to find me to fix something, So, but I don't know. I have no idea for sure. I have just my own little theories, which could be wrong. I could be wrong.
And you said that these have obviously been very life-changing experiences for you, but you seem to fall on the side that it's changed your life for the better. Would that be an accurate statement?
Well, yes, I would say that, because I that's what I chose.
Right.
I chose not to let it destroy me, because I feel like everything in your life is a choice that you could make. I don't put my bad choices on anyone else. I take responsibility for them. Taking responsibility for them is the first step in fixing them. But like if I hadn't met Bud, I wouldn't have met my late husband, which means I wouldn't have been up here where I live now, which means I wouldn't have met my husband now, which means my kids wouldn't have gone to their schools they went to, which means they wouldn't have met their spouses. My grandchildren would have never been born. I would have never had the job that I had with the General Motors. There is absolutely nothing in my life now that would be even remotely recognizable had I not met Bud. And if I hadn't had the experiences that I had, I wouldn't have met Bud.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't change a thing, as hard and scary as it may have been. I'm happy with my life, because there's always room for improvement. And I'm a work in progress till the day I stop breathing. But
Have
you ever had?
I'm sorry, John. Go on. Just a very quick statement. You said earlier in the interview something that I thought was very interesting. You said you felt fear, but the fear was a side effect, as if they weren't trying to scare you, that you were just scared. It was a scary situation, obviously. But so could this be where the good versus evil encounters from the others? Could this be where the debate lies, in a general misunderstanding of their intentions? Or are there good intentioned others and bad intentioned others? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that there are, just like I said, I think there are a lot of different agendas going on with a lot of different entities or whatever, life forms, some good and some bad. I mean, I have to believe that, because look at human beings. Look how many different kinds of human beings, how come, people there are, and they all have different agendas. Some are nefarious and not good, and some are. So, and I don't think it's any different in that world.
Fair.
I feel fortunate enough that I feel like I've gotten whatever I've had contact with has either been neutral or benevolent, or maybe a combination of both. I know there are people that may have been contacted or had experiences with malevolent, bad things, and I feel bad for them. I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
Have you ever had something that we call downloads? Have you ever had like information that you suddenly thought, oh my God, now I know how to do something? Or
yeah,
do you ever get anything like this?
Yes, I did. I didn't know what it was called at the time, because back in 1984, we didn't call it downloads. I just called it feeling crazy. It would wake me up. I had a period of life, maybe for about a year and a half or 2 years after June 30, 83, where I would be awakened in the middle of the night with these images and phrases and thoughts. And I could not go back to sleep until I drew the pictures I saw in my head, or wrote down what I needed to write down. Once I put it somewhere where I wouldn't lose it, I was free to go roam about the cabin, as I would say. I was free to go back to sleep or whatever. And it got to the point where I started to carry a notebook with me everywhere I went, because one of these, like a sentence, like one time I'm driving down the street and all of a sudden this blast comes in my head that says, all that you seek, the answers are in the blood. And I'm like, what the hell? And I couldn't even focus on my driving. I literally had to pull over, write it down. And then I found, once I wrote it down, I was fine and I could go on about my day. That happened for like a year or a year and a half. And there's drawings on my website that I did of images that I saw in these little episodes.
Would you wake at a certain time? Would
it
you wake
always
at the
seemed
same
to be
time every night?
Like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. It was always like right in the dead middle of the night that would completely screw up and wreck my entire day going forward, because I wouldn't be able to get back to sleep.
Would you get a nosebleed, or would you get a sound in your head by any chance?
I get a sound. It sounded like the snow sound that you hear on a TV screen when it's not dialed into something. It was like that snow sound. And I would almost see it in my eyes. My eyes were closed, but I could see what looked like snow on a TV screen in my head with my eyes closed, and I could hear it. And then one time I heard a voice, and I could hear people talking, and they were talking in a language that I did not understand. And I felt they were talking about me. They weren't talking to me. I was just overhearing something inadvertently. I don't think I was supposed to have heard it. And then I heard a voice boom in my head really loud that said and this was in English, it said, there will be a prestigious listener in November. And I'm like, what the? I woke up, I sat up out of bed, and I looked, my husband at the time, he's like, what's wrong? What's wrong? I'm like, I think I'm having a nervous breakdown. And I told him, and he goes, sounds to me like somebody's trying to tell you something. You better write that down. I'm like, okay. Yes, definitely.
You've never woken up with like an entity floating above your face or anything by any chance as well, have you?
I'm scared the crap out of you, aren't I? When I was a little kid, I had sensations of someone. My eyes were closed, mind you. I was too afraid to open them because I could feel them right here right here in my face. I could feel them, and I was too afraid to open my eyes. And this is when I was a little child.
Yeah.
Someone was there. I could feel them, but I would not open my eyes.
Like an inch from your face.
Literally just barely not touching my face. And then one time I woke up, it was after the tornado there was another tornado back in the 90s, and I was living with my parents. And when was this? And it might have been the ice storm. Ooh, I think it was the ice storm. There's so much. Anyway, my parents we were without power for like 10 days with the ice storm, and Daddy had a generator. And I don't think we were living there at the time, but I think we had come over to stay because they had a fireplace and more food and a grill to cook on outside. But I was laying in bed. I remember laying in bed listening to the generator, and then I heard the generator stop, which meant it was out of gas, and that old man was going to be out there filling it up with gas. And I opened my eyes because I sensed someone in the room, and there were 8 people standing around my bed, but they were all different kinds of life forms and all different ages and sizes, young and old, male and female. And I was startled, but I wasn't afraid. And I said, "Who are you?" And the old woman who spoke for the group said, "You don't remember us?" And I said, "No, I do not." And she said, "Well, that's okay. We really don't look like this anyway. We're just looking like this for your benefit. But we just came to check on you and make sure you were okay and to tell you you're doing a fine job and everything is going to be okay." And I said, "Okay." And then I closed my eyes. I heard the generator come back on, and I opened my eyes again, and they were gone.
This is like cold shivers having this conversation with you. Honest to God, I used to wake at 3:23 every night for a year. I would wake up with the sound in my head. I would have an entity an inch from my face.
I thought I had a brain tumor when that first happened. I told my husband, I said, I need to go have my head checked because I think I have a brain tumor, because that's just normal people don't do that.
Yeah,
but
I actually asked the question on UFO Twitter whether anyone else was suffering the same thing that I was suffering, because I was thinking the same thing. Have I got brain cancer? Have I got something wrong? You know, because it was really messing with me at the time. I'd get the heavy nosebleed. I'd never had a nosebleed up until that point. You know, ever.
I've had a couple of nosebleeds through my life, but probably not any more than normal people. But my youngest son, that child, it was so bad. I finally had to take him to the emergency room, and they had to cauterize the inside of his nose. Hell, he was only 2. And the doctor says, "Oh, he stuck something up his nose." And I'm like, there is nothing in that child's nose that he could get up there that would hurt him like that. I promise you. I am that kind of mother. And he goes, well, then he stuck his finger up there. And I said, look at his fat little finger. Then look at his teeny weeny nostril. You know, that ain't happening, you know? Yeah. And he's like, well, I don't know, but they fixed it. And he still had he still gets nosebleeds as an adult, but it's not very often anymore. But yeah.
So you've had an amazing life for this, basically. I mean, people are going to be shocked watching this interview.
I have had the weirdest life. I'm grateful. My life has been one hell of a ride, you know, and hopefully I got a few good years ahead of me left that I can find out, you know, learn some more and maybe have another.
What the hell is going on?
Yeah.
Deborah, have your kids? I'm sorry, John. Have your kids ever had any strange experiences?
When they were little, and we lived at that house, you know, around that same time period as 83, my oldest son woke us up screaming on one occasion, said that the little man with the big head was coming out of the closet to take his brother. And when we went in the bedroom, he was frozen stiff, solid, and he couldn't even move. But he was screaming. And then that's when I looked over, and the other one, who was like 13 or 14 months younger, he was probably 3 maybe at the time, he was covered in blood, and there was blood all over the floor, and it was smeared up on the side of the wall. God. It was it came out of his nose.
Yeah.
And what we couldn't
scared you.
It scared the hell out of me.
Yeah.
It's one thing to do it to you, but doing it to your children, that's the part that I'm not keen on, you know.
Me either. And we headed off to the emergency room, you know, because I thought, oh my God, this kid's going to bleed to death. But the thing that scared my mom, and my mom commented this to the doctor, is this child over here is screaming bloody murder at the top of his lungs. This child over here is covered in blood, and he's not awake. He's not moving. It's like he can't hear his brother. And it's like, we're going to the hospital right now. Well, there wasn't anything wrong with him. I mean, they cauterized his nose. So, I mean, I've just had so many weird things happen. And in a way, I'm kind of thankful that I'm not the only one that experienced him, that I had mom, my dad, my sisters, my neighbors, other friends I've had weird things happen to me with, because if all of this stuff in my life only happened to me alone with no one else around, I would seriously wonder about my mental health for sure. But it can't be me. It can't just be in me, because other people see this, and there's physical things like the doctor visit reports and the mark in the yard, and you know,
the neighbors,
the witnesses, the neighbor witnesses. So
yeah. So I mean, are you taking part in any scientific studies or anything like that at the moment? You've just been in the Observers film, but have you been approached by? Have you ever been approached by any 3-letter agencies out of interest? Well, that just popped into my head.
Not that I am aware of. Bud has been on my behalf, but he's blown them off. This was early on, as far as I know. I do know that Bud had made arrangements for my youngest son and I to have an MRI when they first came out, and we had to go up to Notre Dame University, to the hospital area up there, to have it done. And there was supposed to be MRIs of our brains, and we had them done, and then our films disappeared. And I never heard about any of it again. I'm not even quite sure if Bud knows what happened to them. He was supposed to get them and didn't, or something. But so that was kind of weird. But I would welcome questions. I don't feel like I'm paranoid, and I don't care if they tap my phone. I feel sorry for the guy who got stuck with that job because he's bored shitless, I'm sure.
Yeah.
You know, because I'm just a boring regular person, and I have nothing to hide. And
you'd like him to knock your door, wouldn't you? You'd like him to knock your door, and you'd force him to come in and sit there and tell you the answers. That's
and
me as well.
they'd probably be like, "Well, we got to go now," you know, and I'd be picking their brain. But I would more than welcome to answer any questions anyone has. I will do the best I can. I'll tell you what I remember. Yeah. I'll tell you what my theory or thought is on it. That doesn't mean that I'm not wrong, but you know, just mine.
Well, let's put it this way, Deborah. Your theory and thought about time travelers and possible interdimensional beings is exactly the same as mine. That's mine as well.
I think that, yeah, I do believe that there's life out there in the other planets, you know, 100 millions of light years away and stuff. Yeah. I absolutely believe that the universes are teeming with life of all levels, like us and higher advanced. But I also believe that there's life all around us that we can't even see on different dimensions and different levels. And as far I am concerned, I think a majority of my contact has not necessarily been extraterrestrial rather than something else.
Yeah.
I find it very interesting. Towards this beginning of our chat, you said that what we're getting is a tiny sliver of reality. That was a sentiment echoed by our last two guests. One being Dr. Robert Davies, a respected scientist who deals with consciousness, and the other being an author on the occult and mysticism. And now we have you, a regular person with these strange experiences, and it runs the gamut. It seems to be the same statement every time. We're only getting a tiny sliver of objective reality.
And I feel like people like me and you who've had these experiences, for whatever reason, I don't know whether I was born with a couple extra circuits up here, or the experiences that I had early, the physical contact facilitated some kind of a change, and I got a couple of extra plugins. But I feel as if I will echo the words of Dr. J. Allen Hynek, that he spoke to my mother after one of our sightings, and we couldn't believe that there weren't thousands of people that saw what we saw. He said, I'm beginning to think that not everyone can see these things. Yeah. I feel like there's a little extra switch that's been flipped on in my head somewhere that has given me the ability to see and sense things around me that are around everybody. But maybe not everybody has got that extra circuit or switch, you know, yet. Yeah. Everybody is capable. The wiring is in the brain. The plugins just need to be made. And I got mine somehow. I don't know.
Do you meditate or do any other spiritual practice?
I try. I'm a little bit... ADHD, you know, I'm easily distracted. I do try, but you know what? It's that kind of scares me, because when I really start getting into it and get deep into it, and I really start feeling it flowing and everything, I feel like I'm leaving my body, and then I'm like, nope, because I'm not yet.
Oh,
yeah. I had an out-of-body experience when I was just a little tiny kid that scared the crap out of me, and I think I have some residual PTSD from that. Yeah, I do try. I have anxiety, and I do try to, you know, try to breathe and spend time outside in nature alone, and try to meditate that way, just to try to keep my anxiety under control.
What do you advise others to do with other people like experiences who may not be? I mean, because you've been having these experiences all your life, you're sort of normal for you now, isn't it? It's part of your life, and you're almost getting on with it, even though you've got PTSD. You say, what would you advise other people in our situation to do if they're having these, you know, anxiety attacks, and you know, they're worried and scared? They're worried maybe
Tell someone.
their kids are going to get the same sort of thing happen to them that they had, you know.
Tell someone. Talk to somebody. I started out writing journals, which ended up being my books. But, you know, journaling helped me a lot. Sometimes it helped to take it out of my head and put it on paper and then reread it, because then I got a little different perspective on it and learned a little something different from it. So journaling helped me a lot. I reached out to Bud. There are, you know, there's a lot of people out there and some of them aren't so good. So you've got to be mindful about who you reach out to. Hypnotherapy, I think, that it gets a bad rap a lot of times. I only got hypnotized 2 or 3 times. Almost all my memories are spontaneous. But I think it can be useful if it's done by the right person and the right person is being hypnotized. I don't think some people are good subjects for that. I wouldn't hypnotize some people. And also you want to make sure that the person who's doing it is reputable and trustworthy. You know what I mean? Because it can, I think, be harmful if it's not done correctly by the right person. So those are sort of things that I would suggest, you know.
There's actually your answer ties into a question I had. So I'm assuming that you're well versed in the abduction literature. Is there one writer or researcher besides Bud that really stands out for you as coming close to the truth? And vice versa, is anybody really getting it wrong?
Well, you know, I haven't met anybody yet that could fill his shoes, but I personally love Yvonne Smith out in California. She directs CERO, the Center for, I can't remember what the acronym is, but she's a hypnotherapist, and she's one that I would trust. And she knows a lot of people who, you know, all around the country that she could direct you to. Networking is good. And then Peter Robbins, whom I met, he was Bud's assistant for a long time. And I met him because of Bud. And Peter and his sister Helen, Helen was the experiencer. Peter swears he didn't have an experience. I think he did, but you know, that's just me. But I adore him, and he's one of the smartest people I know. And he knows some people who could be helpful psychotherapists, you know, like on the East Coast. And so I would say Yvonne Smith, Peter Robbins are 2 people I would trust. There's a lot of good people out there, but those are my 2 go-tos. And I adore Linda Howell. Linda is she's like I feel like she's almost my big sister. I met her because of Bud immediately after Intruders was published, and she kind of just took to me, and she kind of took me under her wing and has always been very protective of me and very caring. And you know, when I finished my book, Extraordinary Contact, I let her know about it, and she wrote an endorsement for me, and she had me on her show. And that's how I ended up on the Observers, is through Linda, because when Linda was recruited to be on the Observers, they asked her if there was one abductee that you would like to be recorded interviewing, who would you recommend as one of your, you know, favorite ones, or ones you think would do really well. And she recommended me. And that's how I became a part of the Observers cast. So
that's fascinating. Yeah, Linda Moulton Howe is one of my favorite researchers on the topic as well. But have you ever read the work of Dr. David Jacobs?
Yes, I read a lot of David's books. I met
very
him.
Alarmist.
Yeah, you know, I met him very early in Bud's investigation of my case. He worked with Bud, and he knew Bud. He wasn't on my case, but I met him, and he was kind and nice to me. And actually, when I needed a place to sleep one night during a conference before my room would be available, his wife and him graciously opened their home to me, and they were very kind. And he's a nice man. He's a smart man. But I personally don't feel that I'm not as negative about it all as he is. Mm-hmm. I'm not a university professor either. So, I mean, I'm not like that smart, even though I'm in Mensa. I couldn't balance my checkbook till I was 35. So, so I think that's just because I didn't have any money, so I didn't care. But, I'm not as dark as David is with the whole hybrid thing and all that. So, but hey, could be wrong. I could be wrong.
And have you ever had any throughout your whole history of strange experiences? Has there have any ever involved owls in any way? I'm sorry, it was a jumble to get up.
Not off the top of my head. Deer. One night a deer was involved, a head-on view of a deer, but I know owls play prominently in abduction phenomenon as a screen memory, because after one of the ways that I deal with things that scare me is that I try to learn as much about them as I can, because I feel like knowledge is power, and then I feel stronger. And, so I became a MUFON investigator for the state of Indiana for like 10 years. And more than one time I encountered people with screen memories that involved owls. So
have you noticed that? Go on,
John. No, you go on.
Have you ever noticed that you've got really, really strong gut feelings? Do you get really strong gut feelings with, like, as if it's a sort of a power almost?
Absolutely.
Your intuition is crazy.
It is
you know
insane.
things in advance. Yeah.
Yes. I scared the crap out of my ex-husband one time. We're driving down the street in the middle of the night out in the country, and I said, "You better slow down." He goes, "Why?" I said, "Because there's going to be a critter run out in front of the car." And he go like, "Whatever." And as soon as he turned around and said that and looked at me, here come a deer out of the brush in the side of the road, and he slammed on the brakes just in time to not hit this giant deer. And for a minute, time was frozen. That deer's just staring at me, and I'm just staring at the deer, and then it runs off. And my ex-husband looked at me and said, "How did you know that?" And I go, "I don't know. I just felt it. I could feel it coming." I learned a long time ago to trust my instincts, because they will never lead me wrong. Every time I second guess myself, I screw up. So trust my instincts. In observers, I really didn't quite understand why I was there, and I'm part of that while I was there filming and stuff. And I've had weird mixed feelings about things. And then yet I would get on my knees, and I'm not a religious person, but I'd get on my knees in the hotel room every morning and I'd say, "You brought me here. So please, whatever it is you want me to do or say, bring it in me and put it out of my mouth. And please don't make me look crazy." Every morning. And, I told Roger, the director, I said, "I trust that the universe puts me where I need to be when I need to be there for whoever needs me to be there." And so, that's how I roll. I get invited to do a lot of things. I have for the last 30 years, and I usually turn them down. I'm not interested in fame or fortune in any of that. I got a job and it pays well, and I'm happy, and I have a life. This is just a part of my life and me. But when I feel that compulsion, that instinct that tells me, "We need you to do this now because someone else needs this," and then I'll go do it, because I get that feeling. And I could be it even is a micro down to, I could be walking through the Walmart aisles, and I can walk past somebody if they get close enough to me, and I brush by them, and there's something extraordinary about them, like they're one of me, or there's some evil, creepy person or something. I feel it as I go by them. And every now and then I'll encounter someone that all I got to do is look at you or hear your voice, and I can almost see the entire life that you lived in the flash of a moment. And I know you, I mean, and I can't turn it on. I can't turn it off. It doesn't always happen. I don't know how to, it'd be great if I could meet someone who would teach me how to control it. I could rule the world. But right now I'm just a crazy old lady with a bunch of dogs and cats.
Keep up that meditation.
Do you have anything, other thing happening in your home, like other paranormal type thing? Do you ever get things just disappear, and then
Oh yeah,
they come back later on? Do you get that sort of thing going on?
oh yeah. I'll have pieces of jewelry or my glasses or my car keys or my cell phone. I set them down and I know where I put them and they're not there. And then they'll show up in my, in my dressing closet on the shelf or in the crisper drawer of the refrigerator or in the oven or some goofy stuff.
Do you find
like
it
that.
amusing? Do you find it amusing, or do you find it? Do you like? When it happens to me, I'm like, oh come on, and I'll go make coffee. I'll come back, and there it is.
I'm annoyed. Like if it's my car keys and I need to go somewhere and they're playing with me and I'm annoyed, then I might throw out a F-bomb or something. But otherwise it's like, oh, that was a good one. That they're in my book. There's a story about the time I lost the promise ring that my ex-husband gave me when we were dating. And I was devastated. 3 days I couldn't find it. And I started having these premonitions and feelings about where it was. I ended up ripping the carpeting up at my kid's bedroom and the padding underneath the carpet all the way to the middle of the room. And there sat that ring under the padding and the carpeting. And my mom had a cow when she saw me ripping up the carpeting until she saw the ring before I did. And she was like, oh, holy cow,
Yeah.
So, I have things like that.
But you don't get any negative parts of that, apart from things going missing. Do you get anything like a nastiness going on? Like you hear about the hitchhikers at the Skinwalker Ranch, the guys that have been there, and they get some bad things have gone on for them, and it's affected them. You don't get anything like that side of things.
No, I feel almost protected from that sort of thing. I don't know why, but I honestly do. There's been a couple times when I've been in a place where I could sense something evil or not good watching me. You know what I mean? And I think to myself, oh Lord, girl, don't let yourself be paranoid. That's crazy. But then I think to myself, well, I know that there has to be negative for there to be positive. So I'll say something like, keep dreaming. You ain't getting close to me. So you might as well just move on. And then it goes away. So maybe I just talk myself out of a paranoid issue. I don't know. But I feel protected and I feel very blessed and fortunate. I had a psychic tell me one time that she said I had a lot of spirits around me and it was like a party atmosphere. They got a real kick out of some of the stuff I did. And I go, well, I'm glad someone does.
I think I'm done with my questions. You've answered a lot of my questions already by the things you've said. So I did have more questions about The Observer. Were you happy with the name of the movie being called The Observers, out of interest?
I thought it was an unusual choice. I feel more like The Observed than The Observers, but that's just my opinion. Apparently
I think that the orbs are like mirror glasses and they're watching us. I've always had that impression that they're like a camera and they're literally a floating, like a drone that we, the sort of drone we call them now, but a drone that when I was a kid, they used to follow me around. I used to get the feeling though that I was being watched.
I always felt like they were. I always felt like they were actually the life force, the energy, the entity itself. But
it's interesting that you had that the one that hit you. You feel like it hit you and it hurt your eyes, and that was indoors. And we hear about these transmedium craft or orbs now. Orbs that have been seen to go through buildings into nuclear silos, and they're looking around. They're scanning the areas. It seems, or they're doing something like that. But people that have also got too close to these things seem to have been hurt. And we had Damien Knott on from Australia, an experiencer from Australia, and he had got too close to these orbs a couple of occasions, and he's been hurt, physically hurt. And it's the same thing. You seem to have walked in on that one, and you've got hurt from it.
Yeah. And Travis Walton, now Travis says that he believes they picked him up because they hurt him or basically killed him with that beam that hit him, and they picked him up to save him. To fix what they thought they might have done. So, I got a couple things they could come fix if they're interested. But, you know, I've always said I'm a cat with 9 lives, and I've blown about 5 of them now. So they better start keeping a closer eye on me if I'm not done yet.
Well, yeah, that's all for my questions as well, John. Deborah, this has been fantastic. An absolutely great interview. Keep doing everything you're doing. Keep it up. It's awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much.
Can you tell the people who are watching how they can find you or contact you, or are you on Twitter or Facebook or anyone?
Well, I'm on Facebook, but I don't get on there a whole lot. I have a website that my husband maintained. We've had it up for like 20 years now, and it's www.debshome.com. That's DEBSHOME.com. And you can contact me through there. You can email me through there. You can read about some of the things that aren't in the books there. There's pictures to look at. My husband likes to find interesting news articles and pieces to put in there, and some science stuff because I like science stuff. So you can go and see that and visit me through there and contact me through there. And the links to my books are there. And I think there's links to get Intruders and also maybe even Missing Time also there. So.
Yeah, we'll put all those links in the description for that as well. But just one more quick question. Last night I watched the first half of the TV movie, The Intruders. Have you seen it? What do you think?
Oh, yes. You know, I'm so thankful that Tracy Torme did that in a respectful way, because that was done during a time when things weren't done in a respectful way. Trust me. But it's hard for me because when I meet people, a lot of them have seen that TV miniseries, and they're like, "Oh, remember when this happened? And remember when that happened?" And it hurts me to have to say that wasn't me. Basically, when they bought the rights to Intruders, they pretty much bought the name and maybe a couple of scenes in the movie, and everything else is a compilation of multiple cases all mashed into one big Hollywood stew. Mm-hmm. And although I will say Mare Winningham played me in the movie, and bless her heart, she called me twice to ask me how she should play these 2 scenes that they had taken directly out of the book, because she wanted to do right by me. And I really appreciated that. And she did a good job in those scenes. But honestly, and it opened a lot of people's minds, and it did a lot of positive things for people who've had experiences and for ufology when it came out. And I'm grateful for that. But I really wish someday somebody would actually read the Intruders book and maybe even mine and see this incredible life and these experiences and redo it, accurately, because it's much more interesting than the miniseries was. So,
well, on that note, that's been fantastic, Deborah. Thank you for your time.
Thank you,
Deborah.